Shedeur Sanders wasn't supposed to fall. Heading into the draft, he was ranked the top quarterback by 9 NFL decision-makers. Yet somehow he dropped all the way to pick 144.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Mel Kiper Jr. has had enough. In a blistering takedown, Kiper blamed the Cleveland Browns for Sanders' slide and accused the organization of orchestrating yet another quarterback disaster. With Kiper pointing to a quarter-century of dysfunction from Brady Quinn to Baker Mayfield, Sanders' situation is being framed not as an outlier, but as a continuation of Cleveland's destructive quarterback cycle. Kiper's attack hits where it hurts, the Browns' front office. What should have been a seamless transition for a promising prospect has instead become another test case in internal chaos. Kevin Stefanski is reportedly doubling down on Dillon Gabriel, whose struggles are on full display, while Andrew Berry stands sidelined, unable to push Sanders into the spotlight. It's a textbook example of ego overriding execution, and Kiper's condemnation makes one thing clear: until this team stops sabotaging its own talent, the losing will never. Mel Kiper Jr. didn't just criticize the Cleveland Browns, he dismantled them. In a stunning, brutally honest broadcast, the longtime NFL draft analyst aired years of frustration over what he called the franchise's systematic sabotage of quarterback talent. But this time it wasn't about Tim Couch or Brady Quinn or Johnny Manziel. This time it was about Shedeur Sanders. And this time Kiper had receipts. 9 NFL executives reportedly had Sanders as their top quarterback on the board. Not just a top 5 guy. Not a potential steal. Number 1. And yet somehow, someway, Sanders slipped all the way to pick 144. The 5th round. An absolutely baffling drop for a quarterback with that kind of scouting consensus. So what happened? According to Kiper, it wasn't about Sanders' talent. It wasn't about character issues. It wasn't about mechanics or tape. It was about Cleveland. Specifically, the toxic decision-making environment that's been dragging quarterbacks down for 25 years. Because the moment the Browns selected Sanders, it stopped being about potential and started being about power. And that power struggle, as Kiper laid out in unflinching detail, is tearing this team apart from the inside. On one side, you've got general manager Andrew Berry, the man who saw value where others got nervous. He pulled the trigger on Sanders in the 5th, believing he'd just stolen one of the draft's best-kept secrets. On the other, head coach Kevin Stefanski, who apparently never wanted Sanders in the first place. Stefanski has his guy, Dillon Gabriel. And even though Gabriel has performed poorly, Stefanski is sticking with him. Because in Cleveland, it's not about performance. It's about politics. So what do you get when a GM drafts a quarterback the coach doesn't believe in? You get silence. You get conflict disguised as development. You get Shedeur Sanders buried on the depth chart while the offense sputters, the fans scream, and the coach pretends there's nothing to see. Mel Kiper wasn't just mad about Sanders not playing. He was furious about why Sanders isn't playing. Because the only thing keeping Shedeur Sanders off the field right now is ego. Not readiness. Not game plan. Ego. Stefanski has dug in. Gabriel is struggling. The offense is losing games. The media is asking questions. Fans are begging for change. But the Browns aren't moving. They're locked in a battle of wills, while the season slips away. Kiper called it what it is: a continuation of Cleveland's quarterback graveyard. A place where talent isn't just mishandled, it's smothered. This has happened so many times before. Baker Mayfield played through injury, led the Browns to their first playoff win since 1994, and still got thrown out when internal tension boiled over. Johnny Manziel came with problems, sure, but the Browns were a circus during his tenure, offering no structure and even less accountability. Brady Quinn? Never developed. Never protected. Tim Couch? The first face of the new Browns back in 1999, and a cautionary tale by 2003. The cycle is painfully clear. The Browns draft a quarterback. The front office and coaching staff aren't aligned. There's no long-term plan. No clear path forward. The quarterback gets tossed into instability and blamed when things unravel. The team resets. The fans start over. And now it's happening again with Sanders. The only difference this time is that Mel Kiper isn't letting it slide. Kiper's denunciation wasn't just about one player. It was about accountability. He accused the Browns of operating like a team where leadership is more focused on winning turf wars than football games. A team where front office egos dictate playing time. Where the head Coaches' personal preferences outweigh the general manager's evaluations. And where promising quarterbacks don't stand a chance. And he's right. The numbers don't lie. The Browns have had just one playoff win since 1999. And during that time, they've had over 30 starting quarterbacks. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. And it's not random. It's cultural. It's systemic. It's Cleveland. And Shedeur Sanders is the latest victim. There's no football explanation for why he hasn't played a single snap. There's no logic behind keeping a QB1 caliber talent buried in the 5th round depth slot while a struggling starter continues to underperform. The fans know it. The media knows it. They'll probably knows it. But inside the Browns building, the people with the power are pretending it's normal. And it's not. What's happening with Sanders is a perfect example of what happens when a franchise refuses to confront its own dysfunction. When communication breaks down. When decisions are made not on merit but on pride. When a team prioritizes internal politics over player development. It's how you turn potential into regret. Kiper made it crystal clear. This isn't just about Sanders falling to the 5th round. It's about what the Browns did after they got him. Nothing. No reps. No media support. No competition. Just a slow, quiet exile while the same broken system rolls forward like nothing is wrong. And what's worse? It's preventable. The Browns could fix this. Right now. They could pull Sanders off the bench, give him real reps and see what they have. They could stop pretending Dylan Gabriel is the future and start evaluating the quarterback who might actually be. But that would mean admitting something they've never been good at admitting, that they were wrong. That Stefanski might have backed the wrong guy. That Barry made the better call. That the dysfunction has consequences. And that's why nothing's changed. The Browns aren't just wasting a season. They're wasting a chance to finally change their story. To prove they've learned something. To show the league, the fans, and their own that this isn't going to be another quarterback tragedy. But until they do, they'll keep adding names to the list. Shedeur Sanders might not be the last promising quarterback they bury, but if they keep this up, he'll be the next. And then what? What happens when the next quarterback agent refuses to take your call? When top prospects quietly tell their reps not to let Cleveland draft them? When your front office becomes known league-wide as the place where talent dies? Mel Kiper wasn't wrong. He was just the first to say it that loud. So now the question isn't whether the Browns have a quarterback problem. The question is whether they're finally willing to fix it. And if they're not, then they deserve every bit of the criticism they're getting. Let us know where you stand. Should Sanders already be starting? Is this just history repeating itself in Cleveland? Or is there still time to save the season, and the quarterback? Like the video if you're tired of seeing the same failures over and over again. Drop a comment, share your take, and make sure you're subscribed, because if the Browns keep going down this road, there's more disaster to come, and you know we'll be here to break it all down. So here we are. Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback once pegged as the best prospect in the draft by nearly a dozen NFL executives, is collecting dust on the Cleveland Browns bench, trapped in a situation that's less about football and more about fragile egos and fractured leadership. And Mel Kiper Jr.? He's not just sounding the alarm. He's slamming his hand on the panic button, yelling, "Are you seeing this? Because this isn't a fluke. This isn't just a coaching decision that'll work itself out. This is exactly what happens when a franchise refuses to confront its own dysfunction. When no one takes responsibility. When promising players get lost in the shuffle. Not because they can't play but because someone upstairs wants to win a power struggle. And the worst part? It's familiar. Too familiar. Cleveland has spent the last 25 years writing the same tragic story in different fonts. Quarterback comes in. Quarterback gets hyped. Quarterback gets mismanaged. Quarterback gets scapegoated. New coach. New GM. Reset. And the cycle repeats. It's happened with top picks. It's happened with trade acquisitions. And now it's happening with a 5th round steal, because yes, that's what Shedeur Sanders is, no matter how the Browns are pretending otherwise. Let's go back to the draft. There was buzz. There were quiet whispers from team personnel saying Sanders was the guy. Mechanics? Sure. Poise? High level. IQ? Off the charts. 9 executives said he was their QB1. Not sleeper. Not project. QB1. And yet he fell to 144. That's not normal. That's not about his tape. That's not about his ability. That's about something else entirely. Whether it was league politics, image concerns, or the kind of quiet pushback that plagues NFL front offices, Sanders dropped way further than he should have. And once the Browns grabbed him, the opportunity to flip the script was right there. All they had to do was support him. Integrate him. Develop him like a serious franchise would with a serious young talent. Instead, nothing. No preseason reps with the ones. No talk of a competition. No press conference laying out his development path. Just a cold, quiet benching behind a quarterback who isn't delivering. Dillon Gabriel, for all his college accolades, has been pedestrian. At best, the offense under his watch is inconsistent, predictable, and largely ineffective. And the longer he plays while Sanders sits, the louder the questions become. Not just about who's better, but about why the Browns are clinging to a guy who isn't moving the needle. And that's what pushed Kiper over the edge. Because it's not just about talent evaluation anymore. It's about the Browns' refusal to prioritize growth over grudges. Development over division. The actual team over individual pride. Kevin Stefanski has clearly planted his flag in the ground. Gabriel is his guy. And even if Gabriel continues to stumble, Stefanski will ride it out. Because backing down now would mean admitting Andrew Berry might have had the better read. And in Cleveland, that kind of admission comes at a price. And what's Berry doing? That's the other half of the tragedy. The GM who took a risk saw value in a sliding prospect, and made what many insiders quietly called one of the smartest picks in the entire draft, is now saying nothing. No push. No public comments. No heat on the coaching staff. Just quiet compliance while his quarterback pick disappears into the background. This is what happens when leadership isn't aligned. And it's why the Browns are still stuck in the same rut they've been in for over 2 decades. It's not just about bad luck. It's not just about missing on picks. It's about structure. About accountability. About a team that doesn't seem to understand how critical internal cohesion is to building a stable quarterback pipeline. Because this is the opposite of stability. This is dysfunction wrapped in silence. And the worst part? Everyone outside the building can see it. The fans have had it. Local sports radio is roasting the coaching staff on a loop. National media outlets are asking why a top prospect hasn't taken a single snap. Social media is in open revolt. Even former players are chiming in, some saying it feels like sabotage. Others saying it looks like the same Browns they've always known. It's one thing to miss on a quarterback. That happens. Every franchise has draft busts. But what Cleveland does, repeatedly, is sabotage potential before it ever gets a chance to fail. They smother it in instability. They bury it in miscommunication. They let office politics dictate playing time. And then they act surprised when the quarterback flames out or asks for a trade. Kiper's rage is justified. He's watched this team botch QB development since before most current Browns fans could drive. And every time a new name comes through that building, there's this flicker of hope. Maybe this one will be different. Then the pattern resets. And we all go through it again. Shedeur Sanders doesn't deserve this. He didn't ask to be dropped into the middle of a cold war between coach and GM. He didn't sign up to be the latest chess piece in Cleveland's internal drama. He just came in, did his job, and waited for his shot. And now, the longer he waits, the more damage is done. It's not just the missed playing time. It's the narrative forming around him. The idea that maybe he's not ready. That maybe there's something the public doesn't know. That maybe the coaches see something the fans don't. But what if the truth is exactly what it looks like? What if Sanders is ready, or at least ready enough? And the only reason he's not on the field is because of internal ego battles that have nothing to do with football. If that's the case, and Mel Kiper seems to think it is, then the Browns aren't just making a bad call. They're committing career malpractice. They're doing exactly what they've done for 25 years, letting dysfunction destroy promise. And where does it end? If history tells us anything, it doesn't end. It loops. Eventually, Gabriel will struggle enough to get benched. Maybe then Sanders gets a snap or two in garbage time. Maybe he plays in Week 16 when the season is already toast. And then the coaching staff will say, "We didn't see enough," and the cycle starts all over again. A new QB drafted. A new regime battle. A new waste of talent. Unless they stop it now. Unless the Browns, finally, take control of their own story and give Shedeur Sanders a real chance. Not because it's a good PR move. Not because the fans are demanding it. Not even because Mel Kiper nuked them on national television. But because it's the right football decision. You don't sit a QB1 caliber player behind a quarterback who's clearly not the future. You don't let internal politics override potential. You don't waste what could be a franchise quarterback just because someone in the building doesn't want to admit they were wrong. And if they do? If the Browns really let this season go by without giving Sanders a shot, they'll be right back where they've always been. Looking for answers, firing people, resetting the depth chart, and pretending this time it'll be different. But we'll know better. We've seen it before. And thanks to Mel Kiper, everyone is watching it happen again. Let's be clear, this is bigger than a bad depth chart. This is bigger than one quarterback being overlooked. What's happening with Shedeur Sanders right now is the embodiment of everything that has gone wrong in Cleveland for 25 years. And unless something changes immediately, it's going to end the same way it always does, with another young quarterback's potential dragged down by a franchise that just cannot get out of its own way. The Browns didn't just make a questionable call by drafting Sanders in the 5th round. They made a mockery of what should have been a franchise-altering move. Because if 9 NFL executives had Shedeur ranked as the top quarterback in the entire draft class, and you managed to land him at pick 144, that's not just value. That's a gift. It's the kind of opportunity that could change the trajectory of your franchise, if you let it. But the Browns didn't let it. They shelved it. They handed the keys to Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback with middling performance, and locked Sanders out of the room entirely. No competition. No real reps. No serious development plan. Just vague quotes about evaluating all options, while the guy they should be building around gets zero shot to prove himself. And now we know why. Mel Kiper put the spotlight right where it belongs, on the power struggle rotting the Browns from the inside. Kevin Stefanski wants his quarterback. Andrew Berry wanted Sanders. The result? No one wins. Especially not Sanders. Especially not the fans. Especially not the people who thought maybe this time would be different. Spoiler, it's not. Let's not pretend this is just about waiting for the right time. We've seen what the right time means in Cleveland. Means never. It means we'll start him once the season is mathematically over. It means we'll put him in once the offense is fully collapsed, and then act surprised when he struggles. It means setting a player up to fail and calling it evaluation. And you know what that leads to? Another wasted year. Another QB being labeled a bust because the team around him never gave him a chance. Another reset. Another draft. Another savior. Another rerun. It's exhausting. Not just for fans but for anyone who watches this league with even a shred of awareness. Because you can't call yourself a professional football team and keep treating quarterbacks like this. Not in 2025. Not with the kind of data, coaching resources, and player development infrastructure that successful franchises are using to win Super Bowls. But the Browns? They're still stuck in a 1999 mindset. Still thinking a head coach and GM don't need to be on the same page. Still thinking quarterbacks can develop on the bench without reps, without communication, without buy-in from leadership. Still thinking fans will wait forever for them to figure it out. And now they're dragging Shedeur Sanders through that same dysfunctional process. Let's talk about what the Browns are actually risking here. First, they're risking Sanders' confidence. Quarterbacks need clarity. They need structure. They need to know the organization believes in them. But Sanders is getting none of that. He's being benched while a less effective quarterback struggles. He's being ignored by a coach who didn't want him. And he's watching every opportunity he earned get handed to someone else. That kind of message sticks. Second, they're risking the players know who's ready. Players know when someone deserves a shot. And if Sanders is showing it in practice, if he's doing the work, showing the skill and still not getting a chance, players see that. They internalize it. They start questioning leadership. They start questioning priorities. Third, and most obviously, they're risking the season. The Browns are not stacked at quarterback. They don't have an elite starter. They don't have a track record of stability. They're losing winnable games. And instead of trying something new, something backed by scouting reports, executive consensus and sheer logic, they're doubling down on mediocrity. That's what triggered Kiper's explosion. The Browns aren't failing because they lack talent. They're failing because they refuse to change. They refuse to adapt. They refuse to confront the fact that maybe, just maybe, the same decisions that have tanked this team for decades are still being made today. And Shedeur Sanders? He's just the latest name caught in the gears of that machine. It's not too late to fix it. That's the part that makes this even more maddening. The fix is right there. Play Sanders. Give him meaningful snaps. Let him compete. Let him show what he can do. Let him make mistakes. Let him grow. Because right now the only thing he's learning is that in Cleveland the game isn't played on the field, it's played in the front office. And that's not how you build a franchise. That's how you build a cautionary tale. Look around the league. Young quarterbacks are thriving when they're supported. When the organization builds around them. When the head coach and GM are working in tandem. When the team has a clear plan. In places like Houston. In places like Detroit. Even in places like Jacksonville and Chicago, teams that used to be dysfunctional, things are turning around. Because they committed. Because they stopped pointing fingers and started building stability. The Browns have had more than enough time to learn that lesson. They've had more than enough quarterbacks, more than enough GMs, more than enough fresh starts. What they haven't had: consistency, alignment, humility. And that's the root of this entire mess. Kevin Stefanski doesn't want to lose face. Andrew Berry doesn't want to start a public feud. And in the middle of all of that silence, Sanders is just waiting, watching, wondering if he's next in line to be discarded, not for performance but for politics. And if nothing changes soon, that's exactly what's going to happen. He'll become another name we talk about in past tense. Another player who didn't pan out because the franchise around him didn't give him a shot. Another quarterback who gets traded or released or benched long enough to lose his rhythm, lose his confidence, and ultimately lose his career. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because Cleveland. And how many more times are we supposed to watch that happen? The Browns owe it to their fans, their players, and themselves to stop the cycle. They owe it to Sanders to treat him like what he is: a legitimate quarterback with serious upside who deserves to be part of the plan. Not a fifth-round project. Not a token backup. A competitor. A potential starter. A guy who's ready to lead if the team is willing to let him. But every day they delay, they make that harder to believe. Fans, and Mel Kiper? He said what everyone else is afraid to: this isn't a quarterback problem. It's an organizational one. It always has been. So if the Browns really want to move forward, it's not about changing quarterbacks. It's about changing how they treat quarterbacks. How they support them. How they build around them. How they align leadership to work toward the same goal. Because until they do that, it doesn't matter who they draft. They could get the next Mahomes, the next Allen, the next Burrow, and they'd still find a way to ruin it. Because in Cleveland, quarterbacks don't fail. They get failed by the franchise. That's the legacy. That's the curse. And unless someone in that building wakes up and says, enough, it's only going to continue. So what's your take? Should the Browns stop playing games and give Sanders the reins? Can they actually break the pattern, or are we watching another wasted talent in real time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you've seen enough of the Browns' broken system. Share it with someone who still thinks this team is turning the corner. And subscribe, because until this organization gets out of its own way, we'll be right here documenting every single meltdown.